welcome to the Irreverent Reader. If you are new here, this is where I like to very quietly discuss books and philosophy and religion and really just anything that happens to be on my mind at the time. I like to think of it as sort of a salon of sorts where we can share ideas. Mostly I share ideas. You guys are welcome to share ideas though. Tonight, I want to talk about 3 things that intersect here for me, actually. Those 3 things are ASMR, meditation, and ADHD. That's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So, ADHD is often thought of as, the territory of young, rambunctious boys. But I think that there are a lot of women specifically, or assigned female at birth, individuals who are discovering that or are learning that that's not the case, that this particular type of neurodivergence is just as prevalent in girls as it is in other genders. I was 34 when I started looking to get diagnosed. At first I really projected on actually my husband, and I saw who knows what article or Facebook post at the time I read that stood out to me. But he looked at me and he was like, I have ADHD? You sure about that? And so I thought, oh, he's saying that I have ADHD. And so I started reading about it, and this was quite some time ago. So I read a little bit about it and, read about how you find out whether or not you have it. So I made an appointment with a therapist, and I went to the therapist, and he said, no, you don't have ADHD. You have anxiety. You very clearly have anxiety. And I said, I have anxiety? And literally everyone who knew me was like, yeah, you definitely have anxiety. I was like, oh, okay. So we moved shortly thereafter. So I found a therapist and I went for a little bit, and then I stopped going. And something that I found made me feel like I should see another psychiatrist. Maybe it is ADHD, because there's a lot of overlap. People say that anxiety causes memory and attention issues, but also ADHD causes anxiety. So I went to another psychiatrist this time, and it was a psychiatrist who specialized in diagnosis, right? That's what she does. And she gave me a battery of tests. I mean, there were, I think it was a total of 16 tests that I took over the course of 3 different days. And there were so many things. And the thing about it was that, I kind of enjoyed it. I would do it again, absolutely. All but one part of it. I'll get to that. But it was a series of puzzles and kind of like games, and I love puzzles. I love puzzles. I will sit and get lost for hours in puzzles. So she gave me all these tests, and she gave my husband a questionnaire, and I tried to get my mom to do a questionnaire, but she was like, I don't know, you were a normal kid. I don't know. But she came to the conclusion that no, you don't meet the criteria for ADHD. And she diagnosed me with an anxiety disorder, depression, binge eating disorder, and a learning disability, because it took me a long time to learn to read. For somebody who has a channel where they talk about books occasionally, I didn't start reading until I was 12 years old. And I don't mean like I just didn't enjoy reading. I mean I couldn't read a complete sentence and comprehend fully the sentence. Like at all. Like I couldn't read. I could read words, but I couldn't keep up with what I was actually taking in. My brain just wouldn't do it. So I was like, okay, I guess I have anxiety, and I guess that causes my attention issues. Ooh. My heat just kicked on, and that's probably pretty loud. So I'm sorry. I hope it's not too loud for you. Hopefully it kicks off again. You might also get to hear the geese out front. We get a lot of really loud geese out front of our house. So so I was like, okay, I guess I'll find a therapist and, see if I can work on tools and stuff for my anxiety. And so I did, and I found a therapist who I really enjoyed her. I actually would like to be friends with this person that I was going to, but the therapy itself wasn't really helping me. The cognitive tools that they were giving me were only mildly helpful. And I was already somebody who liked to meditate. I had begun meditating years before getting diagnosed with anything. So it wasn't like I hadn't already been using certain tools in my life, because I've always been sort of a seeker, you might say. But I quit going because it wasn't helping. And also, it cost me a lot of money because I was a mom and with a husband who traveled all the time. And so, like, in order to go, I would have to get a babysitter. And babysitters are expensive. It costs so much money. It's hard for women, especially. I mean, I'm sorry. It's hard for non-binary and for men too. But particularly women who have children are often expected to be the caregiver. And I was a stay-at-home mom with a husband who worked, so I was the primary caregiver, and that's fine. But it also put up a sort of barrier between myself and this sort of clarity I was trying to reach. So, anyhow, at that point, so I quit going. So then I was 37 years old, and my mom found my old report cards. And in the report cards, they were filled with, we're trying to get Rachel to do less talking. And things like, doesn't turn in homework, even when questioned about whether or not she has her work done. She lies and says she has her work done. There goes the heat, it goes off. She says she has her work done, and then I double check, and she says, oh, no, I don't. and then she goes back to work. So I was all over the place, even in elementary. And these are elementary school report cards. These are from like kindergarten through fourth grade. And they all said the same thing. They all said, has particular difficulty with organization, is disruptive in class because she doesn't know when it's appropriate to socialize, things like that. And that really, that sold me. I was like, no, it's not anxiety. I wasn't an anxious kid. I wasn't a depressed kid. I certainly didn't have binge eating disorder when I was a child. If anything, I didn't eat enough because I would go outside and I'd forget to come back home in time for dinner. I would just skip lunch as a child because I was too busy playing. And so I thought, no, this is ADHD. It has to be. There's too many consistent signs from childhood. So what I decided to do was educate myself. I watched every video. I listened to podcasts. I read books. I took in as much knowledge about ADHD as I could. And one of the things that I read was actually a study that it basically said that one of the particular tests that I was given, the one that this psychiatrist based a large part of her diagnosis on. I know because I have the notes, I have like the results in a file. One of the big tests that she says this pretty much shows that no, she does not have ADHD was called a continual performance test. It was awful. It was terrible. I hated it. It was the only part of the whole thing that like was torture. But I scored in the normal range. So she said I didn't have ADHD. But there have been multiple studies since like 1988 all the way through. The latest one that I found, I think, was 2018. There have been multiple studies that have said that continual performance tests are not a good indicator, especially for adults. This particular test has a consistently and regularly can give false negatives and false positives. So I took this research that I had done and I took my report cards and I kept track of the ways from day to day. I would write down in this particular file the ways day to day that I thought attention and memory and my inability to order my thoughts and to find priority in the things that I needed to do, the way that all of those things impacted my life. So I took all of that to a new therapist. And I was very blunt. I said, listen, this is my goal. I believe I have ADHD. Here's the reasons I believe this. Here's the reasons I believe that this other psychiatrist was incorrect. And I would like to try to become medicated. And she said, okay, well, let's talk through some stuff. And you will need to talk to your primary care physician. And let's do it. I said, okay. And so many hours later of meeting with her and meeting with my doctor and her and my doctor comparing notes, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And that sounds terrible, but it's not terrible. It's fantastic because I got medicated and I've been medicated for 7 months now. That the report card, my mom finding the report card, that was about 2 years ago. And it took me quite a bit of time still to find the therapist and to talk to the doctor and for them to really decide, yeah, okay, I think you're right. Let's give medication a go and see how it works. It works. Holy cow. My life has been revolutionized by this medication. I didn't know that not everybody walked around with this noise in their heads. I all of a sudden don't have the tension inside of my brain that I had had all my life as long as I could remember. My anxiety, gone. Depression, gone. Binge eating, turns out that was an impulse issue. That was a matter of impulse control and obsessive thoughts. So I don't do that anymore. Now, I mean, medication isn't going to be like this magic pill for everybody, but it is my primary source of, it's my primary tool, I should say. It's my primary tool for ADHD. But this video isn't like an ADHD medication ad. So I should move on. So the one thing about medication still, I recently had to switch medications because I live in the United States, and in this country, doctors don't get to decide what is the best course of treatment for their patients. No, that in the United States is the job of insurance companies. So, I changed insurance, which is a very common thing here. If you don't live in the United States, it's actually we didn't even change jobs, but we had to change insurance because the company got a new contract. So the new insurance company does not cover my old medication at all. None. Zero. So also here in the United States, medications, especially brand name medications, are insanely expensive. So if I was going to stay on the same medication, it would have cost me $480 a month just for this medication because my insurance didn't cover it, not even part of it. So they put me on the generic. I'm going to rearrange. So they put me on the generic and it didn't work. It had something to do with the release mechanism of the pill inside my stomach. So I was plunged right back in to anxiety, depression, binge eating, and insomnia, and this noise inside my head. And the only way that I can explain it is imagine being at a place where they crush cars, and that sound of the giant machines and the metal bending and twisting just playing inside your head, and having to think through that noise and having to make decisions and hear other sounds, and all of the lights are too bright. That's another thing I have issues with. I have very sensitive eyes whenever it comes to light. I have trouble at like concerts. Remember when we could go to concerts and we can go places? Yeah. But anyhow, I have trouble at concerts because the lights are way too bright. I can't eat spicy food. I have all of these like sensitivities to the world. I get migraines and all kinds of other stuff. Anyhow, I was plunged right back into that when I had to change this medication. And it took about 2 weeks for me to, one, figure out what was wrong with me, because I was like, why, what is going on? And I kept having to apologize to my children because the anxiety just, it made everything so much harder. I would have to say to my kids, I'm sorry that mommy's so grumpy, but my head is just very noisy right now. And it was in that state that I realized a few things. The first thing I realized is how meditation has helped me all these years. I've been meditating for, I'm going to say 20 years, maybe 17, but like a long time. I'm an old lady. But now I realize like why I like meditation so much. So I have this very noisy brain, right? And through that noise, I have to function every day. And I have to make decisions, and I have to think through processes, and I have to answer people's questions, and I have to take in all of the sights and the sounds of just life. And I get overwhelmed. And when I get overwhelmed, the noise inside my head gets louder, and a warm heat surrounds my face, and I feel like I'm being suffocated with this hot air. And meditation takes that all away. Not all of it, to be fair, not all of it, but it gives me a respite. Meditation, I like to compare to the quiet rooms at Disneyland that they have for neurodivergent people on the spectrum, that they can go to these quiet rooms, and the point is that you remove the stimuli. If somebody who is neurodivergent becomes overwhelmed by all of the information that they're taking in, because that's really what ADHD is. It's not a lack of attention. It's actually an overabundance of attention. I see and hear and smell all of the things intensely. And it's impossible for me to properly filter it all out. And so the noise gets louder and louder and louder. But when I sit in this chair, this is actually my meditation chair. When I sit in my chair and I close my eyes and there's no one else in the room, I'm alone, and I don't have any decisions to make, and I can breathe, and I don't have to hear any additional sounds, and I don't have to take in any additional information, I am able to clear my mind. It's my quiet room. It's a quiet place for me. And I've heard so many people say, I can't meditate because I just sit there and I'm like, how do you know if you're doing it right? And that's the key. When I meditate, I'm not doing a thing. I'm turning off. That was a very loud car. Bass and everything. I'm turning off all of the extra sounds and lights and smells and thoughts and decisions and questions, all of these things that are constantly bombarding me. When I sit down alone in the quiet and I choose to turn off, the requirements of sensation, I'm allowed to just be without being overwhelmed. I've been meditating for 20 years and I never realized that that was the thing. Not until I got on medication and understood that other people don't have that noise all the time. Other people are able to pay attention to just one singular thing. They don't have to fight as hard to take in the right information and to then hold it in their brain for a particular amount of time. And it wasn't until that was taken away from me again for that 2-week period during my medication change. Once that was taken away and I was put back in the state I was in before, it was quite a shock. It was terrible. It was awful. It was almost unbearable. And that's when I realized meditation was me trying to get that noise to go away, or at least to quiet down. So that's why meditation is so important for me. But what about ASMR? Anyone who has ADHD, if you have ADHD, you know that sleep can be quite the difficulty. So I think it's about 80%, maybe it was like 75%. About 75%, I'm going to have to put a link down in the description. I'm pretty sure it was 75% of people with ADHD have a disorder, and it is called delayed sleep phase. So at the end of your day, when the sun goes down and you have gone through your daily routine and your circadian rhythm is coming back down to its lowest, your body gets ready to tell you it's time to go to sleep. And evidently neurotypical people, their bodies do this at nighttime. Well, a delayed sleep phase means that people with ADHD aren't ready to go to sleep until about 3-4 in the morning. And they prefer to sleep in to 11 or 12. I didn't know that it didn't take other people 3 hours to fall asleep. That's not entirely true. My brother can fall asleep anywhere in no time. I mean, like, sit down on the couch, boom, out, just gone, asleep. What? And I've always thought that he was the strange one. Turns out on average, it takes the average neurotypical person 7 minutes to fall asleep. No, like 3 hours. I have to go to bed at 9 o'clock in order to get my brain to go to sleep by 11. And if I'm still awake at midnight, I'm doomed. If I'm still awake at midnight, I'm awake till 2 o'clock in the morning. There is no in between, even on medication, because medication makes the noise quieter. It doesn't make it go away entirely, but it makes it quiet enough all the time that I am able to be a little bit more chill and that things don't bother me. And it turns out I'm not an angry person. I was just very frustrated for many, many years. And now, for instance, right now, it's evening, it's nighttime. It's nighttime right now. I have to wait till I put my kids to bed in order to do this. Otherwise, it would be very loud in here. They would want to be in the frame. So right now it's nighttime, and my medication wore off, I don't know, 3 hours ago, maybe. But and the noise is back, but instead of being noise now these days, since I have a better balance of dopamine in my brain, because dopamine is the key in the ADHD, just trust me, because I have a better balance of dopamine in my brain now, I can continue to be in a good mood, and it's not quite so noisy in my head. Now in the evening, it's actually a little bit more like foggy. And I get tired at night. After this, I'm going to take off this makeup and I'm going to go to sleep. But I'm going to go to sleep. Now, the one thing I still struggle with, even now, even though the noise is quieter and I do get tired at a far more normal time, is actually turning the chatter off in my head. If I don't have a particular thing that I am thinking or talking about, and even sometimes when I do have a particular thing I'm thinking or talking about, there are many other thoughts going on in my head. I still notice all the things. If I don't have something to focus on, that chatter, while I'm trying to go to sleep specifically, is like a hamster on a wheel. It's a cliche. It's a very cliche example, but it's true. It just keeps spinning. It doesn't go anywhere necessarily, but it just keeps spinning, and it has the clack, 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 clack sound, and it's going to keep me awake. And there might be an idea that strikes me, or another one. Here's one that gets me. People with ADHD sometimes experience, people who are neurodivergent. This isn't just an ADHD thing, but it does occur with ADHD. Some people who have ADHD experience what's called maladaptive daydreaming. Now, it's daydreaming like you think. I'll link a video on maladaptive daydreaming down below. So that's another thing that can run away with me, is that if I'm laying in bed and I don't have anything that I'm focused on, I can run away with scenarios in my head, like intense scenarios, with quite a lot of detail, and some of my biggest life questions and have come during me trying to go to sleep. That's not helpful. And I've been told by some people to, okay, well, if you have an idea in your head and it just won't go away, sit up and write about it. But if I sit up and write about the idea, I'll sit up and write about it until 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not helpful. Then I might as well have stayed in the idea in my head and just waited until I passed out from exhaustion. So what I have found that works is giving myself something to focus on. This is similar to the concept of counting sheep, except I can't actually focus on counting sheep. That's far too monotonous. That's far too boring. I'll get bored before I get tired. And I don't know when exactly I discovered ASMR. I'm pretty sure it was back in like 2016, somewhere around there. But when I did, and I discovered the wonderful little tinkly feeling and how it relaxed me, and I became absorbed in these videos. The first ASMR artist that I found was the Loon Innate, and I've mentioned her on this channel before. I love her channel. But she would talk, and she would do the hand movements with the crystals and the Reiki and stuff, and and I would just become absorbed in it. And I found that if I watched those videos at night, I had something to focus on. I had something to occupy my focus long enough for my brain to calm down. It didn't completely shut off the chatter, but it came pretty close. It came pretty close. It shut down the chatter enough. It gave me something to focus on enough that even when the chatter would come up in my brain and back here, this would be going on back here, but I'm focused enough that it kind of gets a little bit quieter, and the thoughts aren't like, I'm not grabbing onto the thoughts. And then eventually I'm drifting off to sleep. And I'm still listening to the ASM artist talk. And I might still be listening to their hand movements and stuff. But my eyes are closed. And I am at the edge of that falling into sleep, right? And if at that moment I give in, all I have to do is just put my phone down. Now, one of the keys is that you have to turn on the blue filter. No blue light from the phone. And then also I keep my phone just as dim as it'll go. I turn the light from the phone all the way down. And I will become absorbed and I'll start to fall asleep. And as long as in that moment, I can put the phone down and I give in, I can actually get to sleep before 10:30, thanks to ASMR. Now, without medication, it didn't always work. It didn't always do the thing. But with medication and with other attention to sleep hygiene, because sleep hygiene is huge for ADHD. Things like I had to download an app that would block me from getting onto TikTok because I love TikTok. I think it's just the most delightful place ever. So I had to put on an app because I'll get on TikTok and I'll just flip through 1-minute videos for 3 hours in the blink of an eye. So meditation gives me a quiet place to allow my brain to calm down, and ASMR gives me a delightful, tingly place to focus so that my brain will allow me to fall asleep. And I don't think that I'm alone in that. One of the things about ADHD is finding what tools work for you. And the tools don't work the same for everybody. I have a friend who actually went through a very different but similarly timed journey with ADHD. And some of the things that have started to work for her don't work for me, and vice versa. But we're constantly throwing tips back and forth, being like, oh, I found this thing. You should try it. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So yeah, I have tools now. And I've figured out ways to disrupt the patterns that were causing me harm. And I think that might be the entire purpose of human life. Finding ways to lessen harm on a very basic, daily, individual level. I mean, it's way more than that. But I think that that could be one of the most important things for each individual person to figure out. How to reduce harm in your life. How to navigate the world as a happier person. Because that's been the big change for me. I've been meditating for years, for decades. Been meditating for decades. And it helped. But only recently did I realize how. And only recently did I discover a tool that allowed me to sleep and rest. And so, one of my next videos is going to be on my values in life. Because recently I realized that, my beliefs and my view of the world is a lot different than what would be considered mainstream. I'm not a mainstream individual. I look like a mainstream individual, but inside here, it's nope, not mainstream. And so I thought I realized at some point that I don't know what my personal values are. So I sat down and I started writing them. And one of those values is rest. But I'll talk about that on another video. I would love for you to comment down below. Tell me about your tools, or tell me about your struggles. Tell me about how ASMR affects you, and do you meditate, or have you tried meditation? Tell me. I would love to hear from you. I hope that you have tools. I hope that you have ways to disrupt harm, to bring yourself a little bit of peace and some rest.